And next, from the time that he first heard men marching to a cadence call, Eddie Wright had one dream in life, and that was to be a United States Marine. And as a Marine serving in Iraq, his company was ambushed in Fallujah. He was knocked out when a rocket-propelled grenade hit his Humvee. When he came to, he saw that both his hands were gone, and his leg was badly wounded. He couldn't fire his weapon, he could barely move, and he was bleeding to death. But he had the strength of mind to lead the men under his command, and that is exactly what he did. He kept them calm, he showed them how to stop the bleeding in his leg and told them where to return fire. He had them call for support, and he got them out of there alive. Composure under fire that day earned him the Bronze Star with Valor device. But if you ask him, what did you get it for? He'll tell you, just for doing my job. After a long recovery, Eddie continued to serve as a martial arts instructor. He resigned from his beloved Marine Corps a few years ago, but he still lives by the motto, once a Marine, always a Marine. If you want to see the American spirit of never retreating, no matter the odds, of steady confidence and optimism, no matter the setbacks, look at Eddie's story. No matter how tough times are, Americans always pull through. As Eddie put it himself, we don't really foster the attitude of I can't. When you have an obstacle in front of you, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and focus on what you can. So please join me in honoring retired Marine Sergeant James Eddie Wright. Kirk. He was an Air Force squadron commander and a combat pilot who had flown over 150 missions in Korea and Vietnam. One day on routine mission over Hanoi, his plane was shot down. He spent the next 5.5 years in that living hell known as the Hanoi Hilton. Like his fellow prisoners, Tom endured the beatings, the torture, the hunger, the years of isolation. He described it saying, there was nothing to do, nothing to read, nothing to write. You had to just sit there in absolute boredom, loneliness, frustration, and fear. You had to live one day at a time because you had no idea how long you were going to be there. After 2 years of solitary confinement, pacing back and forth in his cell, 3.5 steps across, 3.5 steps deep, Tom was finally moved to a larger holding cell with 45 other Americans, these prisoners. Among them was a man named John McCain. In circumstances that defied description, this band of brothers, they kept each other alive, and one by one, they came home. Tom was released on March 14th, 1973. You might think that a man who had suffered so much for his country would be bitter and broken by it. But Tom's heart was only filled with love, love for America, that special love of country that we call patriotism. Tom wrote, "Patriotism has become for many a corny thing. For me, it is more important now than at any time in my life. How wonderful it is to be an American, to come home. Friends, please join me in honoring retired Air Force Colonel Tom Kirk. My fellow Americans, each one of these men here today faced terrible sufferings, overwhelming setbacks, and impossible odds. And they endured, and their stories are America's story. We will always come through. We will never give up, and we shall endure, because we live by that moral strength that we call grace. Because though we've often skirted a precipice, a providential hand has always guided us to a better future. And I know that many of us today, we are worried about what we face. Sometimes our challenges, they just seem insurmountable. But here together at the crossroads of our history, may this day be the change point. Look around you, you're not alone. You are Americans. You have the same still spine and the moral courage of Washington and Lincoln and Martin Luther King. It is in you, it will sustain you as it sustained them. So with pride in the red, white, and blue, with gratitude to our men and women in uniform, let's stand together, let's stand with honor, let's restore America. God bless you and God bless America.
It is no longer enough in our country just to look at these brave heroes. They cannot be the only ones that do the tough things. We as individuals, if we want our country to survive, we must begin now to look at our own selves. We must be individuals of faith, individuals of hope, and individuals of charity. When I first put this together, in my head, I thought it was supposed to be political, and I had to announce it for some reason. I went down to Florida. I just felt I had to look people in the eye and tell them what we were doing. 25,000 people showed up, and I looked them in the eye, and I immediately broke out into a cold sweat. And when I got off, we were surrounded by a crowd. It was in the round. And people were screaming and yelling, and hands were coming from everywhere, and I grabbed my assistant by the lapels and I pulled him in close, and I screamed in his ear. I said, "I don't know how, but we're wrong." He pushed me back and said, "What?" I knew we were supposed to come here. So I went back to the drawing board, and over the holidays, I painted the faith, hope, and charity. Those three icons. I brought them back to the television studio, and I said, "This is our direction next year." And they looked at me and said, "What?" And I said, I can't explain it either. I don't understand it, but this is where we're going. It was about 4 months ago that we were still kind of lost, and we didn't know what we were going to do when we got here. And I was down on my knees, and we were in the office, and I said, Lord, I think I'm one of your dumber children. Speak slowly. And the answer was, you have all the pieces, just put them together. The pieces are faith, hope, and charity, and looking for those things inside each of us. So we have plenty of medals for our heroes.
Glenn, you're a hero.
They do things that none of us want to do. But when I found the original story of the Purple Heart, the badge of merit, our troops take bullets in our name. They do things for us in our name, and we give them the Purple Heart. But the original intent on the Purple Heart from George Washington, it was called the Badge of Merit. It was the first merit badge, and it was given to any soldier that had done something of merit, had done something of honor, because George Washington knew to be able to defeat the most powerful navy and army on earth, he had to have farmers and shopkeepers of honor and merit. There were 3 given out that we know of. They were lost until 1933 when they were rediscovered. And FDR took those and designed the medal around it to be for being wounded in action. I would like to humbly ask that maybe as civilians we go back to that original intent, and for civilians we begin to look for merit in one another. We begin to look for honor. People who have done the tough things and stood against the tide because it was right. Today, we begin to award the new badge of merit, restoring honor. Today, we will award 3 medals to civilians who have done the right thing throughout their life and touch the lives of other people, so our children can see regular people making tough decisions and living their life the right way. To restore America, we must not only restore honor, but in doing so, we'll restore heroes. Our children need people to look up to. Well, those people are not giants like that. They are giants everywhere. They are us as individuals. So today, we will begin. Faith, hope, and charity. Our first medal for faith.
Faith. It's a knowing and believing in something when all the circumstances surrounding you would indicate otherwise. Faith is the cornerstone of America's foundation. You might say it's in our DNA.